Welcome to a new video in my home automation series. So I was thinking what it would be like to store system logs or sort of like log information in InfluxDB and display it in Grafana. I mean, InfluxDB is a time series database. Logs are time series data. So I thought, it must not be that hard. And actually storing the data in InfluxDB is actually not hard. I think working with Grafana, especially with InfluxDB 2.0, that was a little bit challenging, but I think I managed to get it working. So what you can see here is the log of my access control solution. I made a separate video about it. It's about an RFID reader slash keypad reader that I have outside, which controls my gates. So I can just, come in, open the gates or open the door by using either a code or one of these RFID tags, and everything gets logged in a database. Well, previously it was an SQLite database, so it basically logs who was the user, like either the RFID or the PIN code is assigned to sort of what user, what was the result, whether it was accepted or not. Maybe it was an unknown code, so it was rejected. And what was the authentication type, whether it was RFID or a PIN, and the actual code. And I also stored some timestamps. So in the past, I stored it in the SQLite database, and I thought, well, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to put this into a InfluxDB database. So in in the log bucket, I created these access logs. And here I created some data, and of course all the information goes in here. I set up a retention policy of 90 days for this bucket, so all the old data will automatically get deleted. And I created this view in Grafana, as you can see. And here I have, well, it's not really complicated at the moment, it's pretty basic. I have a graph on the top which shows me the last 24 hours, and it shows me how many requests came through in every hour. So maybe if there is a really high in 1 hour or in one particular hour interval, maybe I can investigate, like, why was that happening. And then there is a graph. Sorry, there is this panel on the side, actually two panels, which shows me the end number of entries and all the successful entries, and I have a table view. And of course I can change the hours. So if I want to go back to the last 7 days, then this table updates. This main chart remains the same, so that's always fixed to the last 24 hours. And you can see the obviously the success and the all entries change, and these values change as well. And I also have a couple of filters as well. So if I want to filter on my access codes, I can see them here. I can see the timestamp, everything. So here with this dashboard, I was able to do a couple of things. I was able to create filters I think in Grafana it's called variables. So obviously that needs some specific Flux query in order to get the values. And of course I was able to reuse these values here in the log. I decided that only this table log is going to update whenever I change the filter. This doesn't update, but I could have added the same filters here as well. So let's look at how all this works. And I think what I'm going to do first is going to go into my Node-RED flow. And I've already done a video on the whole access log and how the Node-RED flow works, so I don't want to go through the whole thing again. I haven't really changed much of the flow. It's still what it is since I think probably a good 6 or 7 months since I started working on this. The real change I made is about this section of the flow where I was creating all the log entries. And as you can see, if I zoom back in, there was a node here, an SQLite node, and that has been now replaced with a InfluxDB node. But before we go there, I had these function nodes which generate all the SQL statement to create the records in the SQL database, and I have modified them. So it still creates the SQL statement. Actually, it's quite funny because the SQLite expects the SQL statement in the topic. So I left it as it is because the InfluxDB batch node expects the the data that needs to be created in the payload as an array. And when you create these records, it has to be created in in an object, but it's almost like in a live format. So the object has three attributes. It has a measurement attribute, which is obviously the name of the measurement that you want to create the data in. And then you have a tags attribute and a fields attribute. And as you can see, I decided that I have 4 fields. So I have the name, the result, the type, and a code. And I decided that the name, result, and the type are all going to be tags. And then the fields is going to be the code. In this particular case, the code itself is also a string, so it's not a number, because the keypad can expect codes that has a star in it. So that was the only reason. But I mean, in InfluxDB, the field can be either a number or it can be a string as well. So I decided that to be the string, but this could be numbers. And the batch node, the InfluxDB batch node that I'm using, can accept multiple new records, and this is why it is treated as an array. So the payload contains an array, in which case it only has 1 entry. So I sort of like hard-coded how each of the data looks like. I mean, I was handling all the different cases, like the successful and the block and the the unknown errors and the two-factor authentication errors separate way, or a separate function node. So the code is pretty much the same. The only thing which is changed is, the result obviously is different. But then pretty much every time I have a name, which is one of the users, so the user for which let's say the two-factor authentication failed. And obviously there is a type, whether it's a PIN or an RFID tag, and the actual code itself. So all this goes into this dummy function node, which just basically makes the flow look a little bit better. And then the result go into the log. And this is an Influx batch node. And here I just configured my InfluxDB instance. And in order to configure it, you don't have to do a lot. So it's an InfluxDB. I'm using InfluxDB version 2.1, so I selected 2. The URL is obviously the local host, and the token is the token, the API token for your admin user that you can find in your InfluxDB configuration, or in your InfluxDB UI. So that's it. And here on the main page, you still have to specify your organization and the bucket, and that's it. So this would pipe the information into the InfluxDB bucket, and then the data would get created in InfluxDB. And on the UI, I also had a separate field where you can see the last access log entries. And for that, I used to have sorry, it's not the log, it's the access control. Where is it? Yep, it's access control. So there is a lot of management stuff here, which I explained in my previous video. And there is a log entry of the last 10 events. And for some reason this is empty. Maybe I just restarted my Node-RED or something. But that gets refreshed by this part of the flow. So as soon as the information goes into Influx, I wait 500 milliseconds just to make sure the data is created. I probably, a smaller delay would be sufficient as well. And then I select the same data. And here I'm just using an Influx in node, and that's the selection that I push through. So I'm selecting from bucket log, and I select for the last 24 hours, the measurement, the access log, and I'm just grouping all the results through, because obviously each of the combination of names and results and types and everything is going to come through as separate tables. So by grouping them, it comes through in one single array. It's easier to handle in the Node-RED side. And I'm also dropping some of the fields, and I'm sorting on time. I mean, to be honest, this is not necessary, but I just copied and pasted the same Flux query that I'm using in Grafana. So the information from this comes through in an array, and every element of the array is going to be a single record. And I'm just using the template node to format into an HTML table, and I'm just picking at the various values. Obviously, the code is the value field, so that's underscore value, and the time field is the underscore time. So that's it. So let's look at how it all looks like in InfluxDB. So first of all, I created a new bucket. As I said, I have a log bucket with a retention policy. I'm using it for various different logs. So as soon as I go in, you can see that within the log, I have access log and a system log. They are almost the same. I thought I would start with the access log because everything else works pretty much in the same way. And once I selected the measurement, I can filter on either the name, the result, or the type as the 3 tags. So let's say if I select that, then I can just submit. And when I submit, this error message appears because the value that we have used is a string value. So obviously, when you are using the script editor to build a script, the InfluxDB script editor would automatically apply an aggregation window and the mean. So if you just delete these two and then you submit again, you will see, and of course if you switch to row mode, you can actually see the values as well. And you can see here that this is actually a string type, although the values appear as numbers. But because it's a string, it is not possible to do any aggregation on these. And since I'm going to use mostly a table to show the entries or use the count aggregation method to count how many entries I have, it doesn't really matter. So this is how the data looks like in InfluxDB. Let's head over to Grafana and let me edit this dashboard for you. And well, there's nothing special here. Let's look at the variables. So I created 3 variables in which I'm filtering on each of the tags and, well, actually the values within each tag. So the first one is the result, and you have to give it a name and you can have a label as well in the description. One thing I set from the default values is that the refresh is on time rate range change. So every time the range changes, it's going to recalculate the values. So it's not going to show you all the values every single time. It's going to show you only the values that are in that range. So if let's say in the last 24 hours, I haven't used my key to open the gates, then the DAD is not going to be shown in the drop down. And you can customize it the way you want. So if you want everything to be shown all the time, that maybe what you can do is in the range, instead of using the regular range values, the time range start and the time range stop, maybe you can just default like -5 years and they just basically pick everything up. And in terms of the Flux query, it's pretty much like how you would run a selection. So you select from the bucket, you specify the range, and then you filter on the measurement access log because I have multiple measurements in this table or in this bucket. And what I want to get the values of is the result fields. So I use the keep function in Flux to only keep the result field and drop everything else. So for example, the _start, _stop, _time values. I use the distinct function to reduce the values to the unique values, obviously. And that would still technically in the output leave me with a underscore field and the underscore value column, and the underscore field column would just show result, result, result. And again, I wanted to drop that, so I just use keep again just to keep the final values. And that would be just a simple one column list with all the distinct values shown. And that's pretty much it. And then you can allow whether you want an all option or not. Obviously I wanted an all option, and when you modify the query and you just exit here, it's also going to show you the previews as well. So this is how the results look like. And if I go back and I use the other one, so the name is pretty much the same. The only difference here is that it says name. Well, obviously the name, the label, the description is different. And in here for line 4 and 5, where I use the keep and the distinct, I'm using the different field instead of the, if it says name instead of result. And the last one is the keep, the underscore value is the same. And you can see the values here. And if I go back for the type, you see line 4 says type, line 5 says type, and that's it. So this is all you need to create variables. Since I'm here in the settings, I want to show you one more thing. there is no place in the UI to set your default time range, but if you look at the JSON model and you scroll all the way to the bottom, then there is this section where it says time and from and to, and I think the default is now -6 hours, and I changed it to now -7 days, so it always shows me the last week. So you can change the default time range here, and when you do that, just don't forget to save it. So this is all I made changes in the dashboard settings. And with the variables created, of course, these drop-downs appear automatically up here on the top of the page. Probably the only thing I would say that in my particular example, these drop-downs only influence this access log table. So it would make more sense that they appear right above the access log, but this is how the UI is rendered. So it's always on the top of the page. So first, let's look at how you can generate this view for the last 24 hours. So if I go to edit, you can see that the selection here says, select from bucket log. The range is start -24 hours, so the current timestamp -24 hours. We filter on the measurement access log, and here we only want to keep the columns time and the value, because I don't really care whether it's an RFID or what is the name or what is the success. All I want to get is all the values. And finally, I create an aggregate window. I want the values for every single hour, so every 1 hour, and the function is count. And create empty true. So for every hour bucket when there is no data, I actually get these 0 values. Otherwise, you don't get anything. I mean, I don't know if it makes a big difference, but anyway, I added this as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think I picked a fancy color, which you can pick here. Yeah, color screen, blue, yellow, red by value. That's it. It is fairly simple. I mean, you can use these thresholds as well. If you want like anything more than 10 to appear as red, you can use it here, but I wanted these colors. The next one, let's pick up the easiest one, or the easier ones first, these numbers here. So let's look at all the entries, how I calculate all the entries. It's pretty much the same. As you can see, I'm just selecting the time range, so it always comes from the time selector, and I'm just filtering on access log and nothing else. And then, of course, this view is a stat type, so it's not a time series, because I only care about one single value, and here you can pick the last value. And the other tile is a slightly bit more complicated. The difference here is that I also filter on the result success, and then I group all the values together, because again, the different combination of type and everything is going to create a different table. So by grouping them together, it's going to count all of them together in this stat visualization. And finally, we can go to the access log. And here I had to do a few different things. So first of all, let's go through the Flux query. So it looks quite a bit more complicated. Just like with all the other queries, we select from a bucket, we apply a range, and then we start filtering on the measurement, and then we also start filtering on the results. And this is how you refer to your variables. And because my variables are selecting strings, and it can select one single value and multiple values as well, I tried a few different options, but this appears to be the option that works in all cases. So it equals, and I think it's called the tilde sign, and you have to also specify these strange expression here, because basically we are trying to search by regular expressions that are stored in the which is coming from the variable. So as you can see, they have the same pattern, and this part is the name of the variable that you defined on the variable section. And of course, I'm just filtering on the matching tag. And the next thing that I had to add is a pivot, which groups the entries by the same underscore time value. And I had to create this because I was really struggling to create a table where the headers or the columns are appearing in the order that I wanted them. And also without applying the pivot, I could still, rearrange the columns, and I could also change the column headers. So instead of the technical name to show, user-friendly names that you can see on the screen. But every time I was changing the filter, it would reset these settings, and I would lose the column headers and I would lose the orders. I don't know why it is that way, but I found this example with a pivot while using the pivot, and it seems to work. And as a matter of fact, I still have this question on the Grafana community forum, but nobody has answered it yet. So maybe I will be a little bit wiser and understand why it's only working this way and not the other way. So anyway, I have this pivot, and then I also had to group, because still the pivot would create multiple tables depending on the the various type and result combination. And again, I'm just dropping a couple of fields that I don't want to show here in the table. So for example, the underscore field, the underscore start, the stop, and the measurement fields. And finally, I also sort on tables and description true. And by the way, if you want to understand how this pivot is applied, you can just copy and paste this Flux into the Data Explorer, and you can just execute the lines one by one. I mean, without the pivot and the group and the drop, and then you can see how each of these lines is making a difference. And you can always comment a line out by using the 2 slashes, just like in JavaScript. And that works in the Query Explorer as well in here. So with all this, the data was coming in a table, and I had to do 2 changes. First of all, I started creating these overrides, because that was the only way for me to control what is exactly displayed in the column headers. So I created an override for every single field that I wanted to show here. And all I have done is I specified a display name. So as you can see, instead of showing underscore time, I wanted time, and same for result and type and all the other stuff. And that would give me all the nice column headers that I wanted. And by the way, there is nothing else really specified in here. And in order to get the column orders right, because the column order was following pretty much the column orders that came through from the Flux or the Flux query result, I also created a new transformation, which is called the organize fields. And this is where you can just rearrange the fields. So you can just use drag and drop here and reorder the fields that, the way you want them. And this is the rename that I also used in the past, but this was always getting reset. But that was happening before I used the pivot. So maybe I could have used the renaming here instead of the overrides, but it works now, so I'm not touching this anymore. And as you can see, if I change the filters, then obviously gets updated. If I change the time, then everything gets updated. Obviously, if there is no data at all, I get these no data words here, which again you can override if you want a different text or if you just want zeros. So this is where I'm at with this access log, and this is what I learned about how you can store basically log entries in InfluxDB and assign them in Grafana. Maybe I'm going to spend a little bit more time on Grafana just to add a few more widgets, but this serves me the basic troubleshooting and sort of monitoring activities as I usually do on the access log. So I don't think I need an awful lot to make this sort of operational, but at least I don't have to use a separate database anymore. And since I have InfluxDB and Grafana, I can just use these for data storage and reporting. So if I just want to review on what happened in the past couple of days, I can come to this Grafana dashboard, and probably I'm not going to use the Node-RED dashboard for this particular activity anymore. I think if you pause the video, you can pretty much see all the codes and the Flux queries. So I don't think I need to share that in any great detail. But if you have any issues, just ask me in the comment section below. So I think that will be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.